Okay, pardon the mess in the background. Just, you don't see any of that. Hi, I'm Chanel. I'm a recent college grad in New Jersey. This is episode 25 of the Pipernell podcast, which is all about my knitting, spinning, and figuring out my life. And, designing too, which I sometimes forget about because I'm still new to it. And basically, right now, my life is knitting and yarn. So on the social media, you can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as Pipernell, Pipernell. However, the proper way to spell that is with the space between Piper and Nell, and that's how you can find me. That's how you can find me on Facebook, my Patreon page, and the Ravelry group. So if you want to join the Ravelry group, well, there are many reasons to join the Ravelry group because you get the show notes there, which I take pretty detailed show notes. That's where I host giveaways, I announce test knits for my various designs, and generally it's just fun. So join a Ravelry group. And then my Facebook page for Pipernell, I usually just repost Instagram stuff, but if you like keeping up with Facebook and you prefer that's your preferred social media, it would be good for you to like that page. And on Patreon, so you might be wondering why I have a Patreon. That is, so I am, as I said, a recent college grad. I'm pretty broke. And any funds that I make from my Patreon go into helping me continue my knitting and improve my craft. And kind of, if I get above a certain level, right now my goal is just $100 per month, which I'm pretty close to. I'll have bigger and better giveaways, and I'll be able to, take more trips and stuff to see exciting places and exciting yarny, fibery places that would bring more content to the channel. So if you're interested in that and you want to support my work, definitely go check out my Patreon and consider becoming a patron. So now that all of that plugging's done, just a little overview of what's going on. We have news. I have some knitting stories. I'm still trying to make room for personal knitting, and then some commissions, and I have a bit of spinning, just a quick check-in this time, and lots and lots and lots of yarn that came in this week, which is past couple of weeks. It's been a couple of weeks since I recorded, which is why you see all of the mess in the boxes in the back, and you have even more just like stuffed off camera or behind my chair that you can't see behind me, so I'm using myself as a block against my mess. Oh, and a little bit of on my radar, just stuff I've been listening to. And then, yeah, that's it. Then I would wrap up. So first of all, news. The first thing that I want to announce is just another plug for the Spindle Along, which is my celebration of spindle spinning that's going on throughout the summer. It's ending on July 16th, which is my birthday, because I feel like giving something out on my birthday. And right now we have a grand total of 0 entries. We had one person post for interest. I've had a couple people say they're interested. So just so you know, not calling you out or anything, post your spindle projects in there, and there will be exciting fiber prizes, little notions. If I get enough entries, I will consider getting a spindle in the prize pool. So you should definitely, if you have anything that you're spinning on a spindle right now, that's anything that you're not spinning on a wheel, go for it. Enter it in the Spindle Along thread that's in the Ravelry group. Yeah? Yeah? It's easy. Just enter. Okay, second announcement is that my Pops and Pins sock pattern is published. So this is my first ever sock pattern, and I have the samples with me right here to give you some eye candy. Look at that! It is a textured slip stitch pattern that really especially works with speckled yarns, though it would work well with variegated semi-solid solids as well. And another selling point of it is that this contrasting heel is in fact a toe-up heel flap and gusset, and you do not I repeat, you do not have to cut your main color at any point when doing the heel. So you just plug in your, not plug in, so you just attach your contrasting color for the heel, work in the contrasting color, and then when you're done, cut your contrasting color and then pick up your main color right where you left off. So that is now on sale on Ravelry for $5. I think that's pretty reasonable. And yeah, it's called the Pops and Pins Socks. And I'm so excited. It was a lot of fun writing, and actually there are two versions of the pattern if you buy the pattern. There's one, the full pattern step-by-step that guides you through the toe, through this entire sock up all the way to the cuff with all the finishing details that you need. So that's a very detailed pattern that I would recommend it for an intermediate sock knitter, because some of these might be new toe and heel techniques for you. And the second version of the pattern is actually a recipe, so you might need a bit more sock experience, a bit of sock experience to be able to use the recipe. But if you have an idea of your preferred sock gauge, and or you've knit a well-fitting sock before, you can use your stitch count from that sock and use the main texture on the pops and pins, and that would be the recipe. So go check out the pops and pins sock pattern. And yeah, I'm just so happy it's out. Thank you to all of my test knitters who had lots of patience for me, and because it was my first time writing a sock pattern, I definitely, made a lot of mistakes, wrote stuff that wasn't clear or was just maybe plain wrong, and just their constant feedback and putting up with my revisions was just super helpful, and I could not have gotten here without you guys, if any of you are watching. So the third and final announcement I have is that just a reminder that we have a stitch marker set giveaway for one of these. These are from Pancake and Lulu, an indie dyer also in New Jersey. And you have one set of owls and leaves and one set of a birdhouse and leaves. And the winner will be able to choose one of these, and I'll keep the other one. I have trouble deciding which one to keep. So just go on over to the Ravelry group, find a thread for it, and you can put an entry there. We have a few entries already. I just wanted to give more time, and I'm going to draw a winner by the end of June. So this giveaway is also why, if you enjoy this kind of giveaway and you want to see more, please consider becoming a patron, because giveaways like this was actually one of my Patreon goals. So if I reached a certain monthly pledge level, I would start doing these giveaways once a month, just randomly, just because I, want to be able to send things to my viewers and engage with them that way. And, the more that patrons pledge, the more pledges I get, the bigger and the better I can make these giveaways. So again, check out my Patreon. It's all of the links and stuff will be down in the down bar. Okay, so on to knitting stories. I have a couple of FOs and just one hoe. And yeah, I actually don't have any personal whips right now, I guess, or none to report on. So the first FO I want to talk about is a hat. This is a hat that I actually designed, and I'm working on the pattern. But this was really fun. I started knitting it because I had promised a friend a hat in this foresty green as a gift, because it really works well with her complexion and her hair coloring and everything. So the yarn is actually just Caron Simply Soft in Dark Sage. But isn't that such a nice green? And Caron Simply Soft is soft. So this is 100% acrylic. It will wear like nothing else, and it will last until the end of time. The needles, so first let's go over the pattern details. So the hat is written for kind of, this isn't quite a 1x1 rib, it's a little bit more special than that. But you have a deep brim, and when it fits, it kind of fits a little bit more like a beret, but it is slouchy. and the sizing is adjustable for different head sizes or hair poofiness. And this lace panel is going to be expandable, or well, you can do this shows 2 repeats of the lace pattern. You can definitely do it with 1 repeat of the lace pattern, or since this hat is written in 5 sections, you could do it all the way around and have a lace beret. So this again is going to be an adjustable pattern. The needles that I used on it, which will probably be the ones that I suggest, are US 6 for the brim, for the ribbing, which is a 4mm needle, and a US 8 or 5mm needle for the rest of the body, which creates a nice open fabric in worsted weight yarns. I think I might knit another copy of this hat, maybe for myself. I have a turquoise yarn in my stash that would work really well with this, and I'm liking this hat enough that I want one for myself. So the tentative name that I have for this is the Garden State hat, because, well, the lace reminds me of leaves, the green, the garden, obviously, and I don't know, something like New Jersey inspired. New Jersey is the Garden State, because, well, this was designed in New Jersey, and I would not be making this hat or, for this person, and I wouldn't have met this person if I wasn't in New Jersey. So that's it. That's the Garden State hat. Yeah. Look out for that pattern, I guess. I'll be looking for test knitters soon if I feel like getting it out. I need to also re-knit the sandbloom hat, because I didn't write enough details when I was doing the crown decreases, and now I can't remember how I did them, so I might as well knit another sample. Okay, next FO is that crop top I was working on last time. I'm just going to hold it up. I don't really feel like putting it on. It's blowing out the camera because the colors are a little too bright to handle. So this should be, camera's not showing it. This should be more of a magenta purple. It's showing up as like super reddish pink, which is more like this color. So this color is a true kind of hot pink, reddish pink. And that's what it looks like on the front. It's not a halter, actually. It ties in the back. I modified it from the original pattern, which calls for a halter. And this is what it looks like in the back. So I have these kind of 2 small anchor straps that I also modified, and it laces up in the back. So the original pattern is the Lex crop top by Wool and the Gang. It's a free pattern, but you do have to sign up for a newsletter. But what you can do, and they'll email the free pattern to you. But what you can do is sign up for the newsletter, take your free pattern, and then unsubscribe. Though many of you might be already subscribed to Wool and the Gang, so I don't imagine you'll get any extra emails. You just send it and they'll email you the PDF. So the hook I used on this was actually a USH or 5mm hook, which I think is bigger than the 4.5mm or so hook size they recommended. I didn't try a smaller hook size. I picked up this hook size, and I was used to using it for worsted weight acrylic. And it's also been a while since I crocheted, so it ended up being a good thing, because as a returning to crochet person, my gauge would probably be tighter than it was if I was a more practiced crocheter. So it was probably good to size up. And I mean, I'm happy with the fabric that I got anyways. It's nice and dense and very not open, which is good for something that's going to go over my boobs. And yeah, when the weather decides to settle and actually stay sunny and become summer, then I will be actually wearing this thing. But right now, it's just sitting and looking pretty. The last FO I have in my knitting stories is finally my Lunar Tide socks. Ooh, they're showing up really nicely on camera. So I finally finished these socks. I don't know why it took me so long. I like seriously, so these were knit cuff down 2 at a time, but I seriously stalled out while I was on the foot. I think I was sitting like here on the foot for a week, And then I finally picked it up, and I could only bear to do like 1 or 2 rounds per day for some reason. Um, and for some reason, yeah, I flew through the leg. I don't know why. This was my first cuff down pair in a while, so maybe I've gotten so used to toe up socks, because when toe up, you start at the toe, you have to worry about how long the foot is, then you do the heel, and then you're on the leg, and then you're home free. You just knit the leg to however long you want, and then you knit the cuff. But with cuff down, you knit the cuff to the length that you want, that the cuff and the leg to the length that you want. You do the heel, and then I guess you have to worry about how long the foot is. So maybe toe up socks are better for me, because the worrying part is at the beginning, worrying about length and fit, and then once I get to the cuff, the leg, I'm not worrying about anything anymore. I didn't mind. I mean, I don't mind the actual like cuff down parts of it. Like, I love Kitchener stitch for some. I think some of you might remember from last episode how I Kitchenered a tube scarf shut. I actually love doing toe decreases in the shaping, so I used a rounded toe decrease for these socks. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I am finally developing a toe up versus cuff down preference. For a while, I would just say I didn't have a preference, but I think I might be swinging towards toe up. Okay, so another look at these socks. The pattern is Lunar Tides by Louise Tilbrook. It's a free pattern on Ravelry, and I would definitely recommend it. If anything, just for this beautiful cable pattern. It's cabled, but you also... Let me just kind of put it on my arm. It's cabled, but you also have eyelets within the cables that makes just the overall design a little lighter. And then you have very, textured seed stitch panels between the cables, which everything's just so special about this sock. The yarn that I use is Ethereal Fibers Starlight Sock, which is her 7525 merino nylon stellina base in the colorway Anchored. So the sparkle, I feel like, really brings out, well, the texture really brings out the sparkle in the sock, and because it's a semi-solid, it just looks like, I think Lunar Tides is such a fitting name for not just the pattern, but for the sock. Just, it feels like you're on the sea at night, and you can't tell the difference between the night and the ocean, and everything is blending together in this wonderful navy blue with spots of sparkle and lighter blues. Yeah, I just am really in love with these socks. So I can't wait to wear them. Because the cables and the seed stitch make the fabric super squishy, but also stretchy. Yeah, I love these socks. Needles. I use my usual US1 ChiaoGoo circular needles for 2 at a time. So these are 64 stitch socks, and they fit just fine. Again, because it's stretchy, it scrunches up on itself, it fits just fine. If this was more knit and purl, if it was a super stretchy pattern, I would have to size down or decrease my stitch count. But I haven't knit with US zeros before, so that's something I would like to try. I might order a set of zeros and just try some sock knitting. And by the way, these are going into 2 cows so far. If I find one to triple dip them into, I will. The toe, yeah, you see, I like that little detail. So these are going into the Get Lit and Knit Spring Sock Cowl, which ends June 30th. So for those of you knitting socks, you still have time. And whips are allowed. So that's an Instagram only cowl, but I'm sure a lot of you have Instagram. So you can totally go enter and look through their hashtag, and it's just a lot of good stuff. And I'm also... This is one of my contributions to my part in the Summer Sock Marathon, which is hosted by the Knitters League. And that in that one you form teams. I'm in a team with Shonda Faye, or my friend LaShonda, and one more person, a top bang with, and alt earburn y'all in here. And I saw you join the group. Hi, welcome. And Shamika, my friend who lives over in Brooklyn, and I need to see her more often. So the four of us together have to make 26 socks by Labor Day. That's totally doable. So this is one. I've entered 2 pairs, and so that brings me up to 3. I need 3 or 4 more socks if we're splitting the total down evenly. So, let's go. I have one more knitting story. All of those were the FOs, and now this next one is a hoe, sadly. It's a half-finished object because it's a single sock. The interesting thing about the sock, well, some of you might notice, I normally knit my toes and everything on the sock 2 at a time. But this one I knitted 1 at a time, and in fact I knitted it flat. I knitted it back and forth in this yarn, Regia Arnie and Carlos design. They come in 50 gram balls, and this is how much I have left after 1 sock, because I have pretty small feet. I'm a women's US size 6, though I go actually even smaller to a 5.5 for sandals, not that any of you care. But I also used US 1s for this sock, and it was a 64-inch sock. So it seems like vanilla socks for this, though I feel like it turned out smaller than it normally does on a 64-inch sock. 64 stitch sock, because of the knitting back and forth and the nature of the pattern. The pattern is Green Leaves of Summer now I'll show you the book that I'm working out of. So this book introduces the whole idea of knitting socks straight. Well, the idea is that you can knit them on straights, but you're knitting them back and forth. I actually used a circular needle just as a one long needle, but yeah, you can totally knit socks on straight needles, and isn't that interesting? So the book has 20 patterns, but includes a lengthy intro to the overlapping techniques in each sock. So what happens is these are cuff down. So you actually start with the cuff, you work back and forth in ribbing, and then you work stockinette in the flat. You work flat stockinette, so knit and purl, and you do work. Actually, the heel, it was a heel flap and gusset. You work exactly like you work it exactly like you would if you were knitting in the round, which makes sense. Heel flaps are worked back and forth, and no, like any heel really is worked back and forth, unless you're doing an afterthought heel. I think you're always just working a heel back and forth, and then you go down the foot back and forth, and then you knit the toe while doing the decreases back and forth. So the toe on this was really interesting. This is actually a star toe, so you come to a point or a few stitches and you draw the yarn through and tie it off like a hat. And I don't really like the way it fits on my foot. Because of this star toe, it pinches towards the middle of my foot, like over my third toe, which is not really a comfortable place because my second and my big toe are bigger than my third toe. So that's where, if anything, that's where you would want the peak of the toe to be. But I think it's wearable. It fits, besides that, it fits really well. And I think actually it might be just the amount of negative ease that it has. And as it grows while I wear it more, it will just fit better and better. So how do you get it to look like a sock, you may ask? So you have to seam it up the side when you're done with the toe. And the book covers how to seam it, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it did involve a crochet hook, I used a 2.5 millimeter hook, The book recommends using a crochet hook in the same size as your sock needles. I didn't have a 2.25 millimeter needle, but it turned out fine with a 2.5 millimeter. And yeah, the book gives you thorough directions for everything with photographs on for every technique. And really, like, just encourages you to explore this technique. So I'm kind of doing a half talking about this hoe and reviewing this book. I'm planning to make more projects from this book. So some of my favorite patterns here are this sock wrapped in hugs and where you have some smocked stitches. And the book also provides very thorough sizes for different socks. Some of them, so let me show you the one that I made, which is Green Leaves of Summer. And it comes in children's and adult sizes. So it's actually written for child's medium. That's the picture you have. So you have it on a children's foot, a child's foot, and an adult foot. Comes in child's M, child's L, and then adult small, medium, and large. So 5 different sizes of sock. And this is a vanilla pattern. So I think that's really good for the book to include for the first fingering weight vanilla pattern. The book is very well arranged from most basic sock to probably the most advanced sock. And this would be a great book to work through pattern by pattern. So if it's your first time knitting socks in the flat, you would start off with worsted weight socks. And then you would go into sport weight socks, and these are all vanilla, and then a vanilla fingering weight sock. But I was a bit more ambitious, so I started with the fingering weight sock, vanilla sock. And yeah, they have flip-flop socks. Let me show you my favorite pattern. Favorite pattern in this book is, I think it's the last pattern. Of course I go for, no, well, I like these two. Look at that. The leaves, and the seam ends up on the top, so it's a decorative feature, which is ingenious. Okay, finally there. These are my favorite socks in the whole book. Look at that, isn't that adorable? They're tuxedo socks. And the pattern's called Carnegie Hall. It's so adorable. So yeah, I will definitely be making several pairs of socks from this pattern. And actually, if you look at this one on the back here, that is an ingenious use of the flat technique. And this is something that would be really hard to do in the round. You have a button placket on the sock. So I'm really happy with this book. It was Knit Your Socks on Straight by Alice Curtis. So I'm just really excited to have this book to work through. And this might sway me over to buying more knitting books in the future, because before I just, bought patterns on Ravelry and like individual patterns, downloaded free patterns. So I might be getting more books now. Okay, time to talk about some commissions. So I wanted to start off actually with a short discussion of the legality, the ethics of knitting on commission, because I had a question come up from someone on my Facebook page. Commented, this was on my personal page, and this is in no way like responding to this person, attacking them, so on. It just got me thinking about, the kind of the situation that someone knitting on commission is in. So this person's concern was about using paid patterns. And so I was consulting with some friends who have experience with copyright issues and using a paid-for product to create a product that is sold. And so the conclusion is what I'm doing is not retail. What someone's doing is they are hiring me as a knitter when I knit on commission. They're saying, hey, I don't knit, but can you make this thing for me? And what they are doing is they're paying for my labor, but also for the materials. So the only thing that is different from me buying the materials and buying the pattern, buying the needles and everything, and making it for myself is that my hands are the ones doing the work, so I am getting paid for my labor, and this person is buying the yarn. Well, in reality, I'm buying it on their behalf from using my accounts because this person, like the person who commissions me, usually doesn't know too much about yarn, so I also kind of help consult and give them give them suggestions for patterns, for materials, for like what they want the maybe yarn content or color combinations to be. And this usually in the process we choose a pattern that's available online for us to purchase, and then I work from that pattern and they get the finished object. So really, I'm not selling the object made from that pattern. It's not like I'm buying that pattern, making 10 of them, and then selling it at some market or something. That I would not see as okay. I would personally not do that. That is definitely making for retail. And I know a lot of pattern writers say that's not okay. Some actually do say that's okay, and that's so cool. And kudos to anyone who can make stuff for retail and like sell it for a profit, because I know marketing that is really hard, and it definitely hasn't been easy for me to find people to commission me. And actually I have a couple of opportunities coming up that I'll talk about later, but right now this is just commissions. So no, I'm not redistributing the pattern. I'm not giving away any details of the pattern. If I talked about it, like there's one way to think about it, which is I'm making it for this person, and the only thing that's being swapped out is the pair of hands in exchange for money. And then there's also the way of thinking about it for if I were to make something for someone and I would buy the yarn, I'd buy the pattern, and then I'd send it to them. It's just that they also have to be sending me money, which is also legal, and no one's sending anything legal, no copyright laws are being broken. I'm not sending the pattern with the item. It's just, that's it. That's knitting on commission. So that's basically being a knitter for hire. And I'd love to talk about this more with people, because, and for me, it's just really interesting to delve into the details of stuff. So that's my little, not rant, it wasn't a rant at all, that's my little musing on the business arrangement that I have with the people that commission me, my clients, I guess, if I want to use that official sounding of a word. So the first commission project I have is a whip. It's going to be a long-term whip, but that's okay. This person is also a friend of mine. His name's Brian, and he's pretty close to me, so I can hand deliver this if need be. So this is what I have so far. Look at it! It is going to be a stranded scarf knitted as a tube, kind of like what I did for the honey locust loop. And the yarn that I'm using is Pancake and Lulu. Both colors are from Pancake and Lulu, the dyer that I mentioned earlier in the stitch marker giveaway, and she is based in Princeton, New Jersey, so just about an hour from me. So the two colors, this kind of like off-white is Bone. That's the name of the colorway, and it's on her twist fingering base, so that's 100% it's actually 80-20 merino and bamboo. And then the black is, the colorway name is Charcoal, and it's actually on her sparkle sock base. So you can, if I move it, you can kind of see the sparkle going on. It's a lot more visible in real life. And this pattern, as you might be able to see, is based on DNA, because Brian is a biology person and he had an idea to use DNA in the design, and I was like, yeah, that's so cool, I'm gonna go with it. So this is my own design, and I think I'm gonna call this pattern Helicase, Helicase is the enzyme that's responsible for splitting DNA down the middle to make it from a double helix to a single helix. Oh, look at the insides. They look pretty cool. I have not, honestly, not been working on this. This is going to be a slow-going project. But right now, I have 4 different charts for this pattern. You're following them one by one. And really, the first 3 can be combined into one big chart because they're not being repeated. It's just that they were pretty distinct sections, and I didn't, I don't want to overload a knitter with a huge chart. So the first chart ends about here, right at this line, and I'm on the second chart and I'm about 1/3 of the way through. And this is going to be a long scarf, so about over 6 feet. And yeah, just chugging along, kind of. The needles I'm using are Knit Picks US2, and they're nickel-plated line in 16-inch circular. It's perfect for knitting a tube like this. And that's just progress on this. It's getting longer. I should really work on this more. I've still been feeling the stranded knitting bugs, so yeah. The next commission project is a mofo, mostly finished object. I haven't blocked it yet. That's the only thing I need to do to finish it. But I bound off, and last time this wasn't even cast on. It was just such an addictive project that I finished knitting it within a week. I started it not the Thursday that just passed, but the Thursday before that, and then I was binding off the next Thursday. So this is it. This is the PIVX Shell for a person named Marie, sorry. The yarn that I used is here, Cloudborne Fibers, which is I think it's Craftsy's kind of exclusive brand. It's their superwash merino fingering base, and it's 100% superwash merino wool. It's a single ply, so it's a pretty good approximation for Madeline Tosh, and more affordable too. And this knit up just so beautifully. The pattern is PIVX, I don't know how to pronounce it, by Jen Weissman, who recently I watched her interview with Christy Glass and found out that she's really local to me. She actually lives next town over from me. So hopefully at some point we'll get to meet up at a knitting group meeting, and that would be so cool. And actually, while I was watching that interview, that was when I was binding off. So it was like having the designer with me as I was finishing the project. So the the shell is a traditionally shaped top-down triangle. So you start with the garter tab and you go down here. The great thing about these textures, these are all knit and purl textures, and a lot of them are garter-based, so which made this really fast knitting, and also why it was so addictive, because all I had to do was knit. It is reversible. Yes, I did flip it around. It looks almost exactly the same. Isn't that awesome? And I remember during her interview, Jen said that one of her interests is reversible patterns, which is such a cool thing to focus on, because she's right. A lot of knitted patterns aren't reversible, or there is definitely a wrong side and a right side. And when people wear them, it's nice to have 2 right sides, or at least no such thing as a wrong side. So the needles I used on these were my usual shawl needles, US 5 or 3.75 millimeters. But I did bind off with a US 8. So for this picot bind off, I tend to bind off very loosely. I tend to bind off tightly. And with the shawl, you definitely want a nice stretchy edge to block it to its maximum dimensions. So I used a US 8. And in fact, I didn't even look at the needle suggestions for the pattern. I've realized that with projects like hats and shawls, I've just settled into a usual needle size for each project. So a fingering weight shawl, I usually use US 5. And I haven't had to get a new shawl needle since I made my first shawl with that needle. And my first shawl was the Lionberry shawl, which I've talked about before. I knit it all on US 5s, which was the size that it recommended, and then I bound off with a US 8. So I feel like whenever I've just kept using that as a needle recipe for my fingering weight shawl projects, unless the pattern noticeably calls for a different needle size. Like I've knit a fingering weight shawl on a US 7, which created a really nice open fabric, but that was also suggested by the pattern. My Rock Island shawl and a shawl that I made last year, the summer leaf shawl, those were both on US 7s, both on fingering weight, and they did feel noticeably more open, but in a good way. The colorway name is Stormy Skies. The sample that you'll see if you look it up on Craftsy and the pattern page is in Craftsy, the same yarn, but dolphin blue, which is a lighter, more sky blue, but it still has grayish tones. I like Marie chose this darker steel blue, which looks really nice. And I hope this will keep her very warm. It is definitely very cozy and squishy, and I would definitely knit it again. So yeah, very wearable. That's it for commission projects, actually. All right, going to do a short spinning section. So just update on my 2 current projects, no new spinning projects, but I've been continuing to spin and ply the BFL. This is my most recent one, and I actually want to talk about the spindle I've been using for plying, if it would not be caught on something. So this is the spindle that I use for plying. I call it my Heaven's Wheel because it's from Heavenly Hand Spinning, haha, and it looks like a wheel, haha. And it's much bigger than the spindle that I use to spin the single for this yarn. This yarn so far is working up to be about sport weight, which I'm happy with. And I've realized that I do need to put a little more twist into the BFL, which I am doing. Hopefully there's not too big of a difference between the first bits I've spun up, which had a little less twist, and this and the later parts, which will have more plying twist. But this is a nice big spindle. You can see, I don't know how long it is. I don't have a tape measure on me, but it's a nice long shaft. And the whorl is weighted towards the edges. So this is big, it spins for a while, and it can hold a lot of yarn. And so it wouldn't be good for spinning a single. For a spindle to spin a single, I would want a nice light spindle, and I wouldn't pack it with a lot of yarn as I'm spinning it because I want to have control over how fine the single is, and the heavier the spindle gets, the harder it is to spin the weight that you want. So I spin until the spindle reaches a certain weight that I can't spin reliably anymore, and then I wind it off, and then I ply it onto itself. But what I've learned is that so I've used the same spindle that I spun for plying before, but plying is a lot less, you can be a lot less choosy about spindles when plying. So if I use this, I can ply, and I can actually ply twice as much as I could fit on the single spindle. And this ball is bigger than what I've spun on for this BFL before, because actually what happened was, instead of saving all of the joining for later, I'm going to have a bunch of little balls like this. Instead of saving the joining for later, I joined while I plied up a ball, left it on this spindle, and then spun more single, wound it off, and when I was plying this single, what I did was I spliced it to the plied yarn that was already on here, so I just continued plying. And yeah, I like that. I like how I can get more yarn on this spindle, and yes, so this is my plying spindle. Next is an update on the Berry Turquoise that I haven't shown in a while. So I finished spinning the quarter of the braid that I was spinning. I had taken it was a quarter of a braid. So I have half of a braid of merino, so about 2 ounces. and I split I split it in half, making quarters, and I split that quarter into fourths again. So 4/16 of the braid are on this spindle right now. And so that's what this goes back to what I was talking about earlier with spinning on a full spindle, with spinning a single. Towards the end, it was pretty hard to keep the single as fine as it is right here, but it was totally fine. It's merino. I'm very used to spinning merino, so I was pretty confident. Plus, I don't mind the bit of thick and thin that happened. I think that's going to be really pretty. And also, I just love the colors in this. This is why I'm calling it buried turquoise, because there's little bits of turquoise that aren't quite showing up here. Showing up in all these earth tones, so, you know, turquoise buried in earth. So next is I'm going to spin the other fourth half, just end to end. So this is fractal spinning. I spun the 16ths end to end, each of them, so I have 4 repeats of the same color, and then I'm going to spin that last fourth end to end, and then ply them to the same end to the same end, if that makes any sense, because my spinning vocab is not big at all. I don't know spinning vocab very well. That's all I have on spinning, though. And now on to probably will be the biggest section of this episode, is acquired. So I've been bad. So a couple weeks ago, I was in the city, and actually what I did was I went to the Met, which was really cool. I went to the Met with some friends first of all, we met up and went to a flea market before, then we went to lunch, and in the afternoon, we took the subway up to the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I haven't been to the Met since like high school. My high school took a school trip there, and I was fortunate enough to get like kind of a like scholarship on the trip, so I was able to go. And we went all, you know, so all of their regular exhibits are going to be there from the last time I was there. I wasn't really excited about the, you know, the usual stuff that you'd see at the Met, their Greek and Roman art, the medieval art and stuff. That's going to be there forever. And now that I'm living in the area, I know I can go back there anytime and look at it if I'm feeling it that day. So what me and my friends wanted to look at was their special exhibits that are going on. I didn't manage to check out the Chinese Empire one. So there were 2 special exhibits before I get too far ahead of myself. The first one that I didn't get to go to was a special exhibit on the Qin and Han dynasties in China and the terracotta warriors. So pretty early Chinese imperial art. And then the second exhibit, which I did get to see, which was the main attractor for me on that day, was an exhibit of Rei Kawabuko's, if that's the right last name, her designs. So she's a fashion designer that worked with Comme des Garçons, and I'm not saying that right either, which is this avant-garde fashion label. So the exhibit was awesome. The exhibit was like this, the room was stark white, and they had mannequins set up with the different dresses and kind of assemblages of fabric that were on the runway back when whatever collection it was premiered. So the room was stark white, but they had divided the room into these bubbles and little enclosures where groups of 3, 4 to 5 mannequins were placed. Some of the groups were even like way up above eye level, and you would have to look at the labels on the floor and then look all the way up at the mannequins. And it just felt like this menagerie or zoo of avant-garde dresses, which was super cool. It was a super crowded exhibit because so many people were so excited to see it. But anyway, I got away from the actual acquisition. So later that day, after we left the Met, I took the subway down down Manhattan, and I was on my way back when I realized that I could swing by Pearl Soho. So I did. I had a choice between taking the subway to Midtown and taking the train from New York Penn Station over to Newark, and then from Newark to East Orange, where I live, or I could take the train, or to take the subway downtown, and then take the path from World Trade Center to Newark, which it would be the same place in Newark. So I was like, if I take the train to downtown, I could go to Pearl Soho, which I did. So, yes, I did get stuff at Pearl Soho, which is why I said I was bad, because I really should not be shopping at a high-end store like Pearl Soho. But I did make reasonable purchases, I feel like. These are pretty smart purchases. Lots of yardage, very light and bouncy, and all Brooklyn tweed. So I got a skein of Veil, which is Brooklyn Tweed's new lace weight yarn. It is 100% Rambouillet wool. It's super bouncy. I was talking to the people there about Veil and Rambouillet, and they're like, yeah, the signature of Rambouillet is that it's super bouncy. It has a lot of crimp in it. So yeah, when you squish it, oh my god, look at it. It's like bouncy. It actually is just like rubber. Not that it feels like rubber, but seriously, it's bouncy as rubber. I swear, if I threw this thing down, it could probably bounce up. Not that I would. Not that I would with this precious skein. The colorway here is Thaw. Like, you know, winter thaw. It's so pretty. It came with a free pattern. Jared Flood designed a lace weight cowl to go with this, but I might end up just designing something of my own because this is 450 yards of lace weight. That is an awesome yardage for a very light shawlette, and I think that's what's going to happen with this. The other two skeins are Loft. It doesn't say what breed of wool this is. Oh, it says American Targhee Columbia sheep. So I'm guessing it's a cross between Targhee and Columbia. In the colorway Hayloft. Look at that golden yellow. And Pumpernickel. This nice, like, earthy brown. And it's a perfect name. So it's getting a little dark. Let me open the curtains. It might end up raining. I don't know. Anyway, that's better. So these are both super squishy, super lofty. It feels like, I don't know. People say it's on the rustic side. I can see it's not super soft like merino, but having worked with hand spun, this will feel a lot like working with hand spun. I feel like you have slight, subtle, thick and thin. Let me show on the lighter color. That's probably the smart choice here. And you have, it has this tweedy look because it's, I don't know if it's spun with slightly mottled colors. I don't know how exactly they spin it, they process it, dye it, but it's just super lovely. And I think these two will be a something striped and will be together. This Loft is a 50-gram skein. I know it's huge, right, for a 50-gram skein because it's so poofy and airy. This is 275 yards of fingering weight yarn. This is the same thing. So that means that I have 550 yards of fingering weight yarn, which feels like more of a sport or light DK weight because of the airiness. So, I don't know. Could also be a shawl, but these are definitely my colors that I'd wear striped around my neck. And also might end up being a design. So, I feel like now that I've gotten into designing, I still don't feel like calling myself a designer, but when I shop for yarn, I justify my impulse buys by saying, oh, I'm feeling this. I could design something with it. So, yeah. That was just one thing. Next. The next thing came with the Cloudborne yarn that I used in the PIVX Shell, and this is not going to show up well at all because it's just black. Oh, actually, you can see the sheen on that. So this is Cloudborne Alpaca Wool Silk Fingering. So it's so soft, it's shiny, and it's going to be awesome to work with. It is 45% alpaca, 25% merino, 30% silk. That 30% silk makes such a difference. And I feel like it also balances out the drape of alpaca. So this is going to be super strong, but also work up into a nice delicate fabric. And this is going to be what I talked about last time with my burlesque / lingerie inspired shawl. Haven't gotten a name for it yet, but I've pretty much gotten the look down. So next time you should see this cast on. Again, it's Cloudborne fibers, alpaca wool silk fingering. It is 384 yards in 100 grams. So it's on the heavier side of fingering weight, but still awesome. So the rest of the yarn that I have is actually like huge boxes, and I'm just showing you representative samples of them. So 2 of them are thanks to 2 very generous friends. One of my friends from college, she's a year below me, so she graduated, and she decided to send me a big box of yarn that she wouldn't be able to use. She wanted to destash because she was moving out of her room. She couldn't find anyone on campus to destash with, and she knew that I would be able to use some yarn. Of course, like I need any more yarn. So I picked out the highlights from her box. She sent, some of them were acrylics, one was a big bag of stuffing, some of them were cotton yarns, some of them were fun fur, some of them were wool yarns. This is 100% alpaca wool, 100% baby alpaca. So it's super soft. It's Knitpicks Andean Treasure, and I'm pretty sure it's discontinued because we don't see it on their website anymore. But I hope they bring it back because this is just delectable. Not that I never use the word delectable, so you know this is good. And this colorway is Mystery Heather. This is Finley Heather. And this is Sapphire. So they're all heathers, which I always like working with heathered colors because they just give such depth to the fabric. And I think these 4 would make a nice multicolored, this sport weight shawl. So I have shawls coming up. I love shawls. And I think this will also be my own design. So I have a lot of shawl designs coming up. Maybe I should design a cowl with one of these things just to be on the more balanced side. So along with these kind of one-off skeins, she also included a bag of this Mystery Heather. So I'm going to look for a sweater project for that. My concern is I know alpaca drapes and grows as you wear a garment made out of it. So does anyone have ideas for what would be a good sweater for 100% alpaca? Or should I maybe mix it with something like hold it double with a yarn? Because I'm thinking of something with seams would definitely prevent the draping, but also like I don't mind oversized clothes. I just don't want something that will continuously grow bigger and bigger until it's even just too oversized for me. So if anyone has suggestions for a sweater project, a sweater pattern for sport weight 100% alpaca yarn, yeah, please put it in the comments below or in the episode thread or whatever. So that was one friend box. Second friend box. If I could even get this all in one handful. I don't think I can. Ah, okay, there is still one more. But this is about a quarter, maybe a fifth of the huge bag that I got from this friend, so who is also destashing, and she has a lifetime. She has probably 100 lifetimes worth of yarn, and she was looking to pare down her stash. So this was my payment. My big Santa bag of yarn. And actually, what I plan to do with this yarn is I was actually shopping her stash for a pop-up shop that I'll be doing in the fall. And so going back to what I was talking about earlier about knitting for retail, these are all going to be from my own designs, maybe not my own patterns because I might not write up all of the items I design, but they will definitely all be of my designs so that I don't run into any copyright issues. So yeah, just going to be knitting my fingers off for that. And then, oh sheesh. Last acquired piece, I swear. Again, representative sample. So I have a bunch of Red Heart Softs, which are soft, and Knit Picks Dishy. So this is the multi colorways, and this is in their solid colorway. This is silver, and this is Red Rover multi. So these have a bunch of yarn because after I posted pictures of my crop top on social media, a bunch of my friends messaged me and said they would be interested in me making one. I was interested in kind of seeing if I can make these on commission. So I sourced a few of my friends as guinea pigs, and I'm going to be making them crop tops from their measurements. So that's it. I have a bunch of colors that I'm not showing you because that would take forever. But yeah, that's acquired. I have boxes upon boxes of yarn in my little tiny room. So the last thing I have before we end things is just a quick on my radar section. I've been listening to educational podcasts. I would sum up these two. Just things that I've been listening to. Lots of podcasts while I work on the tons and tons of yarn. By the way, for the pop-up shop stuff, I don't know if I'll be showing those projects on the podcast at least every episode. I might do a roundup when I finish a few objects. That would also kind of drum up excitement for the pop-up shop. So the first podcast I want to talk about, these are non-knitting related, by the way. I'll do a knitting podcast shout out roundup on my next episode. The first one I want to talk about is Sawbones, which is a medical history podcast that is hilarious. I know, medical history, you think that wouldn't be very entertaining, right? But no, humans have done all sorts of ridiculous things in our quest to be better at, understanding how our bodies work and how to treat illnesses. We've done some pretty ridiculous things, and some of them are very dangerous and were not helpful at all. And so Sawbones talks about it in a very lighthearted, hilarious way. And it's actually, the hosts are a husband and wife couple, but the wife is the doctor, and the husband just kind of sits there making ridiculous jokes. He's just silly. Which is great. It's like the opposite of mansplaining, because she's like, no, it actually doesn't work that way, but also nice pun. Something like that. And I always like pair podcasts, both knitting and non-knitting, because the rapport between the two hosts is great. Too bad I don't have a co-host. So that's Sawbones. Okay, let me sum it up this way. You will never be as entertained by gonorrhea as you would be when listening to that episode. My first episode listening to Sawbones was their episode on gonorrhea, and it had me rolling on the floor, actually, because I had to stop what I was knitting and just roll on the floor. All right, next podcast I want to talk about is a little more sedate. It's called History Extra. It's the History Extra podcast by BBC History. And the format they do is one or two interviews of authors of books on a certain historical topic. And it's just super informative. I recently listened to their episode on the 6-Day War in Israel and Palestine. And just they touch on corners of history that aren't so often discussed. And especially if you're an American, these are parts of history you might not know about, like Tudor England and the various members of the royal family. So it's a very, it's a more of a British-centric take on history, but it's still informative to me as an American, especially seeing, the world from someone else's perspective. So that's History Extra. And that's it for what's on my radar, which brings me to wrap up. That's all I got for you guys. So as I go forward in these next couple months, you'll probably hear me talking about knitting for fun versus knitting for business, which, you know, things are picking up. I, maybe not so much in commissions, but as I get more connected in the area and as I'm making a name for myself as a knitter for hire, I'm picking up more opportunities. So I'll be knitting in a lot and crocheting in a lot more cotton, not just for the crop tops, but this past weekend I was at a kitchen store talking to the owner. He had put out an open call for artisans and makers, and he's interested in collaborating on a collection of kind of like pot holders, various kitchen items, those like handle protectors for cast iron pots, cute little things. And again, I should be designing my own stuff for that because that is definitely retail. So that's, by the way, the store is called Kitchen a la Mode. If you're in New Jersey, I would definitely check it out. It's so cute. And it's very reasonably priced. They have an assortment of dishes, but also kitchen gadgets and little doohickeys like corkscrews, tea infusers, very cute things, and a very cute aesthetic. You walk in there and it's an explosion of color, and it makes you want to make your kitchen happier and a better place to, you know, cook and eat. So that's all I got, and I will see you when I see you next time. Again, if you like this, so if this was your first time watching, congrats, you made it all the way through. Hope you liked it. Subscribe, like. If you are a returning viewer, hopefully you're already subscribed. Like this video, give me a thumbs up. And check out the Patreon page if you want to help me keep my art and my craft and my podcast and everything and myself going. And for everything else on social media, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, so on, pipernell. And I will see you next time. Love you. Bye.